Welcome to another Epic Games podcast. I'm Raxzilla. She is Pixel Kitty. How are you doing?
Doing good.
We have a really special guest today that we're very excited to bring on, and that is Donald Muster, the creative director at Chair Entertainment. How's it going, Donald?
Good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
We're really excited to have you here. This is sort of a unique opportunity for us because we took some questions from Infinity Blade fans. And some of the stuff that we're asked about a lot of times when we're talking on the forums or on Facebook or on Twitter is a lot about like, hey, there's some stuff that I really want to know about the story, between the two Infinity Blade games. And so today we're going to have an opportunity to ask Donald some of those sort of questions that we've gotten from the forums. So we're going to jump right into it. This is from Silver's a Beast, who's one of our really active members on the forum, and he's curious just sort of generally about the inspiration for the story of Infinity Blade. Is there something particular that you drew from, when you were creating that universe?
Kind of a lot of the inspiration behind Infinity Blade came from our love of fantasy and science fiction, and it's kind of with all of the stories that we're interested in telling, we're always trying to do something a little different. And so for years we've been kind of planning and dreaming about what our ultimate kind of fantasy story would be, and we just kept saying it'd be cool if we had kind of this blend between a traditional fantasy game or story with elements of science fiction in it. And so we just thought that sounded really fresh and really different, and we hadn't really seen a lot of stuff like that. And so that was kind of the basis for a lot of what we wanted to do. And then once we started to do that, I think there's a lot of themes that we're always drawing from. We like to consider ourselves students of history, so we like to look at a lot of the actual historic events that have shaped the world that we live in today, and said, okay, what if we put a cool kind of twist on that and extrapolated the things that we've done in humanity over the last 6,000 years or so, and kind of base things that way. We also draw a lot of inspiration from some of our favorite authors. We really are big fans of Edgar Rice Burroughs. Who's the creator of John Carter of Mars and Tarzan, and just I think a lot of the rhythm and pacing of his stories from 100 years ago really influence kind of some of the rhythms and mythology of Infinity Blade. And then also, we're super inspired by Brandon Sanderson, and he's one of our favorite living authors. And I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but we've been so fortunate to be able to, we were like, we want to create a franchise that is like something Brandon Sanderson would do. And in the process of doing that, we were able to work with him. And so it's literally like something that he would do. So it's been pretty incredible.
Well, you had mentioned, that sort of, meld between traditional fantasy and sci-fi, and that's actually something that fans brought up a lot in sort of the questions that they asked was, when is Infinity Blade? Do we know? Is there a certain time when that sort of Infinity Blade universe takes place?
Yes, we absolutely know when Infinity Blade takes place, and I don't want to spoil tons of the fun of the story and things that we have yet to reveal in the Infinity Blade universe, and that is a very good and astute question that people are asking, and I'm not quite ready to tell you when Infinity Blade is, but the fact that you're asking that question is very smart, and is something that we are well aware of, and we are incorporating into everything we do. I think that's one of the really cool opportunities with Infinity Blade is we really do have the story all figured out. We have it all mapped out. We know when it is, we know where it is, we know why these things are happening, and so it gives us the opportunity to leave lots of little visual clues as to what's going on and when things are happening. And so we've very much seeded the first game and the second game and the book with all sorts of clues and references as to what exactly is going on. And when it's happening is very important, and that's interesting that you guys have picked that up.
That's fantastic. We had a more specific question from Farfield, was his forum username. Were the Stone Demon and the Archivist also immortals? We know that Thane was, but what about the others?
Well, so that's a really good question. So Thane is definitely one of the true deathless. So he is a full deathless. The Stone Demon, however, is not a sentient creature. So the Stone Demon is more of a I don't want to say mechanical creation, but he's probably a similar magic, or really he's a similar technology to maybe Tell or some of the golems. He's probably more advanced technology than the golems, but he's functionally deathless in that he's probably more of a robot, but or stone brought to life. So he's immortal in that sense, but he's not a sentient creature. The archivist is something a little different. So he's someone who has definitely lived for a very, very long time, but is not true deathless. And so there's some subtleties that we're playing with there that will be explained in more depth in the future. But yes, in the Infinity Blade universe, there are the deathless, but there are also others who may not be, may be functionally deathless, but could still be, they don't have access to resurrection chambers or rebirthing chambers or phoenix chamber or any of that kind of stuff. So that if they're killed, they're killed. Okay. And that's what the archivist is.
Cool. I think that sums it up. The next question is actually one of my favorite questions. It's by Silver from the forums. He's also an extremely active user on the forums. His question was, what is the nature of the analogy between the Infinity Blade story and the Book of the Dead and Egyptian mythology?
Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah, I thought so too.
And very, very astute and very observant. The Book of the Dead is very interesting, and there's some very, very cool stuff in there. And I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, that we try very much to draw on history and on things that we've seen, not just in the literal history of Earth, but in the kind of the way that we tell stories and the way that our mythologies grow in our cultures. And I think that in the world of Infinity Blade, the Deathless are obsessed with the idea of immortality, and I think that that's something that the Egyptian mythologies definitely tap into. So there's definitely things. So Infinity Blade is not a direct symbolic correlation of the Book of the Dead, which I think is maybe what he's asking. But there's definitely some parallels that we are inspired by. I mean, if you look, we named Siris very deliberately. That we didn't just pull that name out of the air, and that definitely came from Osiris, the Egyptian god. That symbolizes rebirth and symbolizes kind of the rising of the phoenix. And we also thought, not just Osiris, but in actually spelling Siris the way we did, Siris, is a palindrome. So it's the same forward and backwards. It's this infinite loop, and that is very, very deliberate why we did that. And one, we did that from our side because it's cool, but there's also a very specific reason in the fiction why Ausar is named Ausar, and why when whatever happened that made him lose his memory, we're not going to talk about that yet, why that happened or who did that, why he calls himself Siris. So very, very astute observation. Not as literal, I think, as Silver maybe thinks it is, but yeah, it's definitely something that is influencing what's happening.
We have a question from Lazar, who is one of the fans that has created a lot of the incredible fan art that we've seen shared on the community site and forums. And this one I thought was interesting. This is something that I didn't even pick up on, which is he has a question about the tattoos that Siris has. And is that something that there's an established story reason for those tattoos, or does it just happen to be a coincidence that he has them?
No, there is definitely a reason why Siris and why Alsar has those tattoos, and we'll go into that in more length in the future. However, it also has a very functional purpose as well. In developing the story, we knew that we'd be basically we want the story to be a little more subtle, and we'd be showing people you'd be some knight killed in your armor, and then all of a sudden we'd cut to someone waking up, and we wanted for those that were observant to have enough detail there that they could conclude that, oh, this isn't a different person waking up, it's not a clone of a body, it's the same body being brought back to life over and over again, so that when Siris's body reforms, we've kind of, I think, established this pretty clearly in the fiction from what you've played so far as players, is that that Tell, who's kind of working with Siris, every time you die in the Vault of Tears, in the castle, whatever, in the Vault of Tears, Tell is coming in later and dragging your body back to the rebirthing chamber that Siris and Issa found in Infinity Blade Awakening, and he's waiting, while your body kind of regrows or reforms or comes back to life. And so those tattoos were deliberately put there to help you understand that, no, this is the same body. It's not a clone. It's not something different. It's the same body that you've always been in, being kind of brought back. So it's to help observant players like these guys figure that out.
That's some fascinating stuff. We have another question from D. Knoll. And this is actually one I've always kind of wondered myself. It's a throwback to Infinity Blade 1. He says, what is the planet that we see in the hologram at the end of the original Infinity Blade, and how does this planet fit into the Infinity Blade universe?
All right, so this is a question that I am not going to answer, but I'll try and give you a little more information on it. So that what you saw at the end of Infinity Blade 1 is extremely critical to what's going on, and to where this story is taking place. So I will tell you this: the planet you saw in that hologram is the planet that this is taking place on. So that you were seeing a holographic image of the planet that Siris is on. I'm not going to say what that planet is or where it is or whatever. I know you guys have lots of speculation. It's actually not that hard. You guys can figure this stuff out. There's enough clues there that I've read many of the theories that are on the forums, and some of them are very, very close to what's actually going on, and some of them are totally not at all close. But yeah, there's again, we're trying to be very, very deliberate in what we're doing, and so I can confirm that though. That image that you saw was a holographic, representation of the planet that you are on. So,
all right, there you have it. Singe32 has a question. He noticed that the Worker and Raidriar wear very similar armor. Why is that?
That is very, very observant and very, very wise of you to see. So the reason for that, oh man, I'm trying to think of how to answer this without wrecking stuff. So, so in the book, there's a line or two where Raidriar talks about how he's going to go, he's basically talking about, the Worker, how subtle he is, and that he's going to go pay the Worker a visit. So obviously there's a way for, the Worker is basically trapped. He's trapped in Saranthia, in the Vault of Tears. But there's obviously, we've established that there's a way that people, we even saw Siris. Siris was able to go down, talk with the Worker, but the Worker was still trapped. He's bound to that prison by more than just, the walls that confine him there. There are things in a soul cell that not only trap his body, but trap his QIP from being able to leave that without another Deathless taking his place, which is what happens at the. I hope this whole podcast is like spoiler alert, right? I mean, this stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So before Siris is trapped there, instead of him, he's literally trapped in that vault. So Raidriar knows this and is able and knows where he is and is able to go visit and talk with the worker. You probably surmise that the worker is a pretty important character in Infinity Blade, and he's very smart, and he is kind of he's the creator of the Infinity Blade. I mean, he has access to what at least people in the Infinity Blade universe or non-Deathless perceive as very, very advanced magic, right? That he can use to create all sorts of amazing things like the Infinity Blade. And the armor that Raidriar is wearing in Infinity Blade. So just think of it this way. If you're the God King and you've got one of the most intelligent people that you know exists in the world trapped in a place, you might have him, advising you on some of your technology or some of your magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's on purpose. So there's a reason why Raidriar's newer armor is similar to what the worker has on. Maybe there was some deal they cut. I don't know. I'm not gonna totally tell you everything that's going on there, but there's a reason for that, and that will continue to be expanded further as we continue to tell the story in the future.
Awesome. Groove Holmes wanted to know who are the ruling four that Thane talks about?
Okay, so this I will again. I don't know if it'll totally satisfy all of Groove's questions, but the ruling four that Thane is talking about is he's talking about the four most powerful Deathless houses or families, and I'm not going to tell you who all of them are, but House Ix, and that is how you pronounce it. House Ix is one of the houses of the ruling four, now, which Thane is a part of. So Thane is a member of one of the ruling houses, and it was kind of his duty and his honor to kind of preside over the imprisonment of the Worker of Secrets. So even though the other four houses kind of made the Great Pact together, which part of the Great Pact was to keep the Worker imprisoned for all time, because they didn't have a way to kill him. They don't necessarily know about the Infinity Blade or the fact that the Infinity Blade is actually working, and so this was the best option that they knew about. Is find a way to keep the Worker imprisoned for all time, and so they made this pact to make sure that as part of the pact was to make sure that the best and most fierce and brightest warriors every generation are sent to Saranthia or sent to the Vault of Tears to make sure that the Worker stays imprisoned there, and it was Thane's duty to kind of oversee and manage that prison, if you will. Mm-hmm. And he ultimately failed because Siris kills him and unwittingly frees the Worker of Secrets. He should have listened to Thane. He should have backed off. Thane gave him plenty of warnings saying you don't want to do this, but Siris isn't necessarily thinking through all of his actions, so whatever.
You talk about how deliberate a lot of the sort of decisions are in the story, and obviously between the book and the two games, there's a lot of sort of intricacies within that story. How did that work in terms of like laying that out? I mean, before you created the original Infinity Blade, what was that process like? Did you map all of that out from the beginning, knowing, hey, we're going to do this Infinity Blade game, there's probably more story for a sequel. How did that process begin?
Well, it began probably about 10 years ago. So about 10 years ago, Jeremy and I, so Jeremy is the other founder. So Jeremy and I founded Chair, and Jeremy's my brother, and so from many years ago we began talking about what would our ultimate kind of fantasy IP be, right? And so we started kicking around this idea of what ultimately became Infinity Blade, and we've been kind of developing it as a team at Chair for a long time from a story standpoint. That's kind of how we do things. I mean, we really, we wanted to, like you said, we wanted to map out a really cool story, and we'd been planning to eventually build that game and eventually tell that story. And when the opportunity came for us to make an iOS game, we determined that we wanted to do this cool sword fighting game, sword fighting RPG. We were like, okay, it's time. This is the perfect way for us to introduce this Infinity Blade story that we've been developing, and we kind of see the current Infinity Blade stuff that we're telling people. We kind of see it as the Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings, right? The Hobbit's like this kind of really cool setup for what ultimately becomes this much, much bigger epic story. And so even the stuff that we're telling you now in the Infinity Blade stories, we really see as the setup to an even much, much bigger story that we'll be hopefully telling for years to come. So we definitely have it all mapped out. We spent a long time kind of figuring this stuff out and figuring out the mythology and figuring out kind of the rules of the universe. And then we were able to partner with Brandon Sanderson, who we're huge fans of, and he was able to look at our kind of backbone and our mythology, and then we sat down and for months we worked with Brandon to really, really flesh it out. I think one of the most amazing things that Brandon Sanderson does is have really, really intricate, well thought out mythologies with really intricate rule-based magic systems, and we were able to establish that for Infinity Blade, where we really do understand the history of what's got us here. We know what's happened 50,000 years before what you're seeing in Infinity Blade, and 50,000 years after it. We have it all kind of figured out, what's going on and what's going where, and why things are, and that just makes it so easy as we make the game, is so we're able to layer in all this stuff so that there will be things that when you're playing Infinity Blade Dungeons that will come out later this year, there'll be subtle clues and words and lines that someone says that hopefully will make things that you saw in Infinity Blade 1 make more sense, and the fact that we were able to put that in Infinity Blade 1 so that when you're playing something 3 games later, you're like, oh my gosh, that's what that meant into the first game. We had to know all that stuff so that those kind of aha moments could come. And maybe this is too long-winded, but I'm a huge fan of Lost. Lost, to me, was one of the greatest entertainment experiences I've ever had. And I know there's a lot of people out there that loved Lost that were really disappointed by the way it ended, because they chose in their fiction to focus more on answering all of the character arcs and character questions than necessarily answering all of the mythology that they built. And there's definitely part of me as a fan of Lost that thinks they didn't quite have it all figured out, all the mythology stuff. Right. And I think they totally nailed the characters, and I loved it. For me as a fan, I just wanted to see my Lost characters resolved, and so that was perfect. But we, going into Infinity Blade, thought, Lost, there was people that didn't, even if people would have been disappointed in what the answers were, they didn't necessarily give people enough information to make them feel satisfied. And we didn't want to fall into that same trap, if that's what existed for Lost. Maybe they have it all figured out and they just chose not to do it that way. But we wanted to make sure we knew everything. So we really have a very, very defined plot and a very, very defined set of rules in the universe. That doesn't mean that we won't come up with new things that we haven't thought of yet, but we know the rules. So we know what has to happen and we know what can't happen, so that everything will stay consistent in the universe. So yes, we have it all figured out.
Awesome. Well, on that note, I think we're gonna let you off the hot seat. Really appreciate you joining us this week. Obviously, want to have you back at some point again in the future. Maybe answer some more fan questions. But thanks for stopping by the Epic Games podcast.
Thanks,
No,
Donald.
no. Thank you guys so much, and keep asking those questions. We love it.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for everyone for listening this week. We have coming up soon. If you guys listen during E3 week, we had a great podcast with Quinn Del Hoyo from Gears of War Judgment. He's going to be back on to answer some of your questions in a very similar way to what we had here with Donald. So look out for that soon, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.